My name is Lily, and I'm 23 years old. Photography has been my passion since I was a kid. I remember when I got my first disposable camera at 10, I went crazy taking pictures of everything: bugs, clouds, my feet. Now, I'm a professional photographer, shooting weddings, aspiring models, and pretty much anyone who needs quality photos. I recently bought myself a professional camera for $3,500. It was a big investment, but worth every penny. My parents nearly had a stroke when they found out how much I spent. "You wasted $3,000 on a camera." Mom had thrown her hands up in exasperation. "Lily, you need to find a real job, something stable, in an office, with benefits." Dad nodded along. "Your cousin Jessica just got hired at that insurance company downtown. They have dental." I wanted to tell them that I actually earn really good money, enough to pay their mortgage every month, but I bit my tongue. That's the thing about my family, they've never taken my career seriously. I still live with my parents, which wasn't my original plan. After graduating from the local community college, I was ready to get my own place, but they convinced me to stay. Mom had been fired from her job at the bank and couldn't find work for months. They were drowning in payments, so I stepped in to help. That was 2 years ago. Mom eventually found another job, but her salary is barely enough to cover groceries, so I kept paying the mortgage. My younger sister, Amy, also lives with us. She's a second-year student at Westfield College, a private school our parents somehow found money for. Our relationship has always been strained. Growing up, Amy was the golden child, the princess who could do no wrong. When I was 10 and Amy was 5, I got a B+ on a math test. Dad barely looked at it before asking why it wasn't an A. That same day, Amy brought home a C, and they took her out for ice cream to cheer her up. The pattern continued into adulthood. My parents paid for Amy's tuition at Westfield College, a fact she never lets me forget. "How's the community college crowd, Lily?" she'd ask whenever her friends were around. "Must be nice to save all that money on education." I try to ignore her comments. I'm too busy for family drama anyway. Between traveling for outdoor shoots and working at my small studio downtown, I'm hardly ever home. I usually stumble in late at night, reheat whatever's in the fridge, and crash. But I love my hectic schedule and watching myself grow as a photographer with each new project. One night in early summer, I got home around 9 p.m. after a particularly exhausting engagement shoot. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, the TV would be blaring one of Dad's sports games or Amy's reality shows. Instead, I found our dining table set with the good china, the stuff Mom only breaks out for Thanksgiving. "There she is," Dad announced as I walked in, camera bag slung over my shoulder. Mom, Dad, and Amy were seated at the table, looking expectantly at me. I immediately felt suspicious. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my equipment down carefully. "We're celebrating," Mom beamed. Amy finished her sophomore year with a 3.8 GPA. I nodded, trying to remember if they'd ever celebrated any of my academic achievements. They hadn't. "That's great," I said flatly. "Congrats, Amy." "Thanks, sis," Amy smirked. Dad cleared his throat. "We think Amy deserves a special gift for working so hard." I tensed up. Whenever my parents started talking about special gifts for Amy, it usually involved my wallet. Amy jumped in, unable to contain herself. "My friends are going to Florida in 2 weeks for a trip, and I want to go with them." All three of them stared at me, the expectation hanging in the air like a bad smell. They wanted me to pay for it. Of course they did. "No," I said simply. "I'm not paying for your vacation. I have plans for my money. I'm looking to rent a bigger studio for my business." Amy's face turned red. "Who cares about your stupid photo studio? I need this trip. Everyone's going." And I need to grow my business, I shot back. If you want to go to Florida so badly, get a job and pay for it yourself. Mom gasped like I'd suggested Amy sell a kidney. Lily, how can you be so cruel and selfish? Your sister works hard at school, she deserves this trip. And I work hard every day to support this family, I said, my voice rising. I deserve to invest in my career. Amy started yelling that I was ruining her life. Dad shook his head in disappointment. Mom continued calling me selfish. I stood up, leaving my plate untouched. I'm done with this conversation, I said, and walked out as Amy's screams followed me up the stairs. For the next few days, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amy gave me the silent treatment, which was actually a blessing. Mom and Dad would barely grunt, "Good morning," before going back to ignoring me. I threw myself into work, visiting potential new studio spaces across the city. One was too dark, another too small, and a third had water damage in the corner. Finding the perfect space was proving harder than I thought. One night, about a week after our dinner confrontation, I came home around midnight after another disappointing studio viewing. The living room was dark, except for the blue glow of the TV where my parents were watching some late-night show. "Where's Amy?" I asked, noticing the unusual quiet. My parents exchanged a look. There was a pause that made my stomach tighten. "She flew to Florida with her friends this afternoon," Dad finally said, his tone deliberately casual. I frowned, confused. How did she afford that? Another pause. Longer this time. Mom lifted her chin defiantly. "We sold your camera and gave her the money for the trip." The world stopped spinning for a second. "You what?" I bolted upstairs to my room, taking the steps two at a time. My camera was always stored in its case on my desk. Always. Except now. The desk was empty. The camera case was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tore through my closet, checked under the bed, and rifled through my drawers. Nothing. My $3,500 professional camera, the tool I used to make my living, to support this ungrateful family, was gone. I stormed back downstairs, rage building with each step. "Are you out of your minds?" I shouted, not caring if the neighbors heard. "That camera is my livelihood. I use it to earn money. The same money that pays your mortgage." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing. Mom shrugged. "Well, if you had just given Amy the money for her trip in the first place, we wouldn't have had to sell it." I stared at them, dumbfounded by their logic. "So this is my fault. You stole from me, and somehow I'm to blame." "Don't be so dramatic, Lily," Dad finally spoke. "It's just a camera. You can buy another one." Just a camera. The same camera I'd saved for months to buy. The same camera that had elevated the quality of my work and helped me land bigger clients. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and something inside me broke. These people weren't going to change. They would always put Amy first. They would always take what was mine and act like I owed it to them. Without another word, I went back to my room and pulled out my suitcases. I started throwing clothes in, not bothering to fold anything. I grabbed my toiletries from the bathroom, my laptop, and the external hard drives that contained years of my photography work. Mom appeared in my doorway. "What are you doing?" I didn't even look at her. "What does it look like?" "I'm leaving." "Lily, you're overreacting. I'm sure Amy will bring you back a nice souvenir from Florida." "A souvenir?" As if that would make up for stealing my professional equipment. I didn't bother responding. After I'd packed everything I could fit into my car, I carried the bags downstairs. Mom and Dad followed me, their expressions a mix of annoyance and disbelief, as if they couldn't understand why I was so upset. "You'll be back," Dad said as I loaded the last bag into my trunk. This tantrum won't solve anything. I slammed the trunk shut and got into the driver's seat without saying goodbye. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the driveway, arms crossed, waiting for me to change my mind. I drove to my small photo studio downtown. It wasn't much, just a converted office space with good natural lighting, but it was mine. I had a small sofa in the corner that I sometimes napped on between shoots. Tonight, it would be my bed. Once I was alone in the quiet of my studio, the reality of what had happened hit me like a tidal wave. I collapsed onto the sofa and sobbed, deep, painful sobs that racked my entire body. I cried from anger, from betrayal, and from the crushing realization that my own family valued me so little. When I had no tears left, I checked my bank account on my phone. I had about $15,000 in savings, money I'd been setting aside for a bigger, better studio space. Now, that dream would have to wait. I needed to buy a new camera immediately or risk losing upcoming jobs. I also needed to find a place to live. In the morning, I called my friend Megan. Her parents owned a small apartment building near my studio, and she had mentioned recently that one of the units was vacant. "Of course you can have it," Megan said after I explained what happened. "My parents were going to list it next week, but it's yours if you want it. The rent is $1,200 a month." It was more than I wanted to spend, but I needed a place immediately. My next stop was Downtown Camera, the specialty store where I'd purchased my original equipment. The salesman recognized me. "Back so soon, Lily. Don't tell me something happened to your Canon." I forced a smile. "Long story, but I need the exact same model today if possible." He whistled. "That's a $3,500 purchase. You sure about this?" "I don't have a choice. I have a wedding shoot this weekend." After buying the new camera, I drove to Megan's building and picked up the keys to my new apartment. It was small, a one-bedroom with a combined living/dining area and a kitchenette, but it was clean and bright, and most importantly, it was mine. I spent the rest of the day moving my things from the car and setting up the bare essentials. I'd need to buy a bed and some furniture, but that could wait. For now, an air mattress would do. Throughout the day, my phone kept lighting up with calls and texts from my parents. I finally looked at one of the messages. "You're being childish. Come home and we can work this out. Mom's worried sick. Work this out." There was nothing to work out. They had stolen from me. Plain and simple. Another text from Dad. "This is what adults do, Lily. They help their family when needed. Grow up and take responsibility." The audacity was astounding. I was the only one in this family who had taken responsibility, paying their mortgage while they favored my sister. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I focused on settling into my new place and preparing for my upcoming shoots. I couldn't afford to lose any income now. That evening, an alert popped up on my phone. Amy had posted on Instagram. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There was my sister, posing on a white sand beach, margarita in hand, wearing designer sunglasses that probably cost what I was now paying in rent. The caption read, "Best vacation ever. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for making this trip possible." In that moment, something hardened inside me. I opened my banking app and navigated to the automatic payment section. With a few taps, I canceled the monthly mortgage payment to my parents' lender. Then I blocked all their numbers, and Amy's. Let them figure out their own finances for once. I tossed my phone aside and lay back on my air mattress, staring at the ceiling of my new apartment. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone, but also strangely free. The next 2 weeks flew by in a blur of work and adjusting to my new life. I threw myself into photography, scheduling as many shoots as possible to keep my mind occupied. The new apartment still felt temporary, Cardboard boxes stacked in corners, minimal furniture, bare walls, but it was mine. No one could sell my belongings here, or make me feel guilty for not bankrolling their lives. I'd managed to avoid thinking about my family by keeping busy, but they weren't making it easy. After I blocked their numbers, they started calling from different phones. I had to answer every unknown number in case it was a potential client, which meant I'd occasionally hear, "We need to talk." I refused to engage. What was there to talk about? They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. One Tuesday morning, I was editing photos from a maternity shoot when my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Lily Evans Photography." "Lily." It was my mother's voice, sharp and breathless. "What have you done?" "The bank called." Her voice shook with anger. "They said our mortgage payment is late. That it was declined." "Is that so?" I replied evenly. "You canceled the payments, didn't you? After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed. "Everything you've done for me? Like stealing my camera? Like constantly favoring Amy? Like making me feel worthless, despite the fact that I've been supporting all of you?" "It was just a camera," she practically shouted into the phone. "I never thought you'd be so vindictive over something so small. Holding a grudge against your own family." The camera was the last straw, I cut in, surprised by how calm I felt. "I'm done being used. I'm done being the family ATM while being treated like a second-class citizen in my own home." There was a pause. Then my mother's voice turned pleading. "Lily, we can't afford the mortgage on our own. Your father's hours got cut back last month. And with Amy's tuition. That's not my problem anymore," I said firmly. "You chose Amy over me, again. Now you can figure out how to support her without my help." I ended the call and blocked that number too. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly liberated. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself, against my family. The next few days passed peacefully. I booked 3 new wedding clients and found a second-hand desk and chair for my apartment. I was slowly building my new life, piece by piece. Then one afternoon, while I was in the middle of a portrait session with a local businessman, the studio door burst open. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," said my assistant, Jenny. "But there are people insisting on seeing you. They won't leave." Before I could respond, my parents and Amy pushed past Jenny into the studio. "We need to talk." "Right now," Dad barked, his face flushed red. The businessman looked alarmed. I apologized profusely and promised a discount on his photos, then asked Jenny to reschedule him for later that evening. After my client left, I turned to face my family. Amy stood slightly behind our parents, arms crossed, glaring at me. She was sporting a deep tan from her Florida trip, the trip that had cost me my camera and, ultimately, my relationship with my family. "You can't just barge into my workplace," I said, trying to maintain my professional composure despite the anger bubbling inside me. "You left us no choice," Mom snapped. "You blocked our numbers. You won't answer our messages. Because I have nothing to say to you." Dad stepped forward. "Well, we have plenty to say to you, young lady. You need to restart those mortgage payments immediately. We've gotten an extension from the bank, but they won't wait forever." I stared at him in disbelief. "Did you really just come to my place of business to demand money from me?" "It's not demanding," Mom said. "It's your responsibility to help your family." "My responsibility?" I repeated. Was it Amy's responsibility to decline a vacation paid for with stolen property? Was it your responsibility to, I don't know, not steal from your daughter? Amy finally spoke up. "Don't be so dramatic. It was just a stupid camera." "That stupid camera was how I made my living," I shot back. "Including paying for the roof over your ungrateful head." Dad's face darkened. That's enough. I won't be spoken to this way by my own daughter. You will restart those payments. Or what? I challenged. Or we'll tell everyone what you've done, Mom said. Your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, everyone will know how you abandoned your family when we needed you. Go ahead, I said, surprised by my own courage. Tell them I stopped financially supporting my family after you stole my professional equipment to fund a beach vacation for my spoiled sister. In fact, if you don't leave my studio right now and stop harassing me, I'll file a police report for the theft of my camera. The color drained from my father's face. You wouldn't. Try me. I pulled out my phone. It was worth over $3,000, which makes it grand theft in this state. I wonder how Amy's fancy college would feel about her being involved in a theft case. My parents stood frozen, the reality of their actions finally sinking in. They had never faced consequences before. Not from me, anyway. You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police, I said, holding up my phone. They shuffled backward toward the door, Mom pulling Amy along by the arm. This isn't over, Dad muttered. It is for me, I replied. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the confrontation in my studio, wondering if I had gone too far. But then I remembered how they had invaded my workplace, threatened me, and shown absolutely no remorse for stealing my camera. I remembered Amy's Instagram post, my mother's dismissive, just a camera, comment, and all the years of being treated as less important than my sister. The guilt evaporated. They had made their choices. Now they could live with the consequences. 3 months passed since that confrontation in my studio. Autumn had arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and brilliant foliage that made for stunning outdoor photography sessions. My business continued to thrive despite the personal turmoil. In fact, without the constant drain of supporting my family, I'd been able to save more aggressively. I hadn't heard directly from my parents or Amy since that day. They'd finally stopped trying to contact me after my threat to involve the police. The silence was both a relief and, occasionally, a hollow ache in quiet moments when I'd remember birthdays celebrated around our dining table or rare peaceful evenings watching movies together. But those moments of nostalgia were brief. The reality of how they treated me always pushed through, reminding me that I'd made the right choice in cutting ties. One crisp Saturday morning in October, I was at a local coffee shop reviewing client photos when someone slid into the chair across from me. I looked up, startled to see my cousin Rachel. "Don't worry, I come in peace," she said, holding up her hands. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." Rachel and I had always been close growing up, but she was also tight with Amy. I hadn't spoken to her since moving out. "I'm good," I replied cautiously. "How did you find me?" "Small town. People talk." She glanced at my laptop screen. "Business seems good." I nodded, waiting for the real reason behind her visit. Rachel fidgeted with a sugar packet. "Look, I heard what happened with the camera. That was messed up. What they did to you. This surprised me." "Who told you?" "My parents." She shook her head. "They've been telling everyone you abandoned them over a disagreement about family finances. But it was Amy who cracked. She felt guilty once she found out they sold your camera." I processed this information silently. At least Amy had some conscience, however belated. "Anyway," Rachel continued, "things aren't great at your parents' house. Amy took a sabbatical from college and is working at the mall to help with bills. Your parents are both picking up extra shifts. The mortgage situation hit them hard." I waited for the guilt to flood in, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of justice. They were finally experiencing the consequences of their actions, and learning what responsibility actually meant. "I'm sorry it came to that," I said finally. "But they made their choice." Rachel nodded slowly. I'm not here to convince you to help them. Actually, I wanted to tell you that I think you did the right thing. They took advantage of you for years. Her support was unexpected, but welcome. We spent the next hour catching up, careful to avoid more discussion of my parents. Before leaving, Rachel mentioned she was getting engaged next spring and wanted me to photograph the event. It was her way of showing solidarity, and I appreciated it. After Rachel left, I thought about what she'd shared. The image of Amy working retail and my parents taking extra shifts was difficult to reconcile with the entitled family who had once demanded I fund their lifestyle. But then again, maybe it was exactly what they needed. Perhaps this hardship would teach them something valuable. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a new, larger photography studio downtown. The space had perfect natural lighting, high ceilings, and a small loft area that could serve as a private changing room for clients. It cost nearly double my previous studio rent, but my growing client list justified the expense. On moving day, as I arranged my equipment in the new space, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of my old bedroom, now completely transformed into a home office. The message read: "Sold the house. Downsizing to an apartment. Thought you should know." I recognized my father's writing style. Terse. Factual. Devoid of emotion. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. It represented the final chapter of that part of my life. That evening, sitting on the floor of my new studio with takeout containers and a bottle of champagne, I allowed myself to truly celebrate my independence. The journey hadn't been easy, but I'd emerged stronger for it. My apartment was starting to feel like home. I'd added personal touches, framed prints of my favorite photographs, plants on every windowsill, a comfortable reading nook by the largest window. For the first time, I was creating a space that reflected only my tastes and needs. My savings account was growing steadily as well. The dream of owning my own place someday was no longer a distant possibility but an achievable goal. I'd started researching first-time homebuyer programs and setting aside a portion of each payment specifically for a down payment. As I sipped champagne and looked around my new studio, I reflected on everything that had happened. My parents had always told me that photography wasn't a real career, that I needed something stable, predictable. Yet here I was, thriving on my own terms. While they struggled to adjust to life without my financial support, I didn't wish them ill. Despite everything, they were still my family, and some part of me would always care about them. But I had no regrets about setting boundaries and demanding respect. Sometimes, love means letting people face the consequences of their actions. Perhaps someday, we might reconnect on more equal terms. Perhaps not. Either way, I was at peace with my decision. The sun began to set, casting golden light across my new studio space. I picked up my camera, the replacement for the one they'd sold, and captured the moment. The resulting image showed long shadows, warm light, and endless possibility. I decided to frame it and hang it in my studio as a reminder of how far I'd come. This was my story now, told through my lens, on my terms. The future stretched before me, as open and full of potential as an unexposed frame.